G'day everybody, it's Danny from Board Game Sanctuary here. I'm an avid modern board game player, I love plants, and I live in a place called Australia. You might have heard of it. Today we are going to be counting down my top favorite 15 next level board game mechanisms. And if you're new to board gaming, this is a video that's going to explain some of those mechanisms in very simple layman's terms. And I'm going to even show you some examples of where those mechanisms are showcased. This video has been in popular demand, and if you haven't seen my original video, I'll leave the link in the description box below. Otherwise, let's get ready to count down my favorite mechanics. Game mechanic number 15 is one that presents players with some really tough choices. Ones which are going to have you really tearing your brain out about which decision you're going to make. It does involve a pair of scissors, but it's a little bit more metaphoric than that. And no, I'm not going to be cutting cardboard with these. It is the I cut, you choose mechanism. It's one where one player takes a pool of resources, divides them into different piles, and then allows the other players to choose which piles they want to take before the original player gets to take the remaining pile that's left over. Hanamakoji is a two-player game which uses this mechanism very well. It's a game about trying to garner the support and favor of 7 geishas by offering them gift cards and allowing them to go on a shopping spree and represent you at your local shopping mall. Actually, it's quite similar to what I just described. But basically, there are 2 actions in this game that exploit the use of the I cut, you choose mechanism. It's basically where you have to create 2 piles of 2 gift cards, and then you need to allow your opponent to pick the pile that they wish to take first, and you get the remaining pile that's left over. What's intriguing about how this game uses the mechanism is the idea that you don't want to give your opponent all of the good gifts. You kind of want to split them evenly across the piles and hope that they take the pile that don't need the most. And that kind of creates this cool ebb and flow effect. It's like, well, I might just entice you with this really great blue gift so that you'll take it so that I can take the other pile that I've put together. But if your opponent can kind of infiltrate your thought process and think one step ahead, they might take the thing that you actually really need. And hey Danny, do you want a slice of cheese? I cut it into 2 pieces so you could choose which one you'd want. But if you cut the cheese equally in half, don't we both just get the same amount? That's what you think. The next mechanic is all about having the best and following suit. And if you've ever played games like Trumps, then you'll know this mechanic really well. It is the trick-taking mechanic. Basically, in the trick-taking mechanic, the lead player is going to play a card or a suit of some sort, and the other players have to follow suit and follow pattern. And the player that has the highest value of that particular suit gets to win the trick and gets to apply some extra bonus effects. Might be scoring extra points or extra abilities. One of my favorite games that uses this trick-taking mechanic is The Fox in the Forest. And what is cool about this 2-player card game is the fact that not only are you playing tricks and trying to beat the lead suit, each of the cards actually has special abilities and game-changing ways to win the tricks. So, for example, the Fox allows you to, when you play this card, you can exchange the Decree card with a card from your hand, giving you extra flexibility and choice throughout the game. You've even got cards like this. When you lead this card in this particular suit, if your opponent has a key, they must play either the 1 key or their highest key, forcing your player to make particular decisions in the game. The next mechanic is all about sharing. Sharing things with the neighbors and the people that you love and the people that you hate next to you when you're forced to kind of interact with them that makes you feel quite socially awkward. It is called Neighbor Scope. Neighbor Scope is more of a situational mechanism where players are forced to work with the people that are adjacent to them. In games like Between Two Cities or Between Two Castles or Mad King Ludwig, players are essentially playing 2 mini games, one with the player on their left and one with the player on their right. Players are drafting room tiles and building up their castle on both sides, and they're negotiating and cooperating with both players. And this creates an interesting social dynamic. You kind of want both castles or both players on either side of you to do really well, but you want to do it better than the people on the other side of those other two players, which is such a cool, interesting social dynamic. And I think at the end of the game, based on the lowest score of the two castles that you have, whoever has the highest score out of the group from those scores is the winner of the game. That layered approach to trying to invite cooperation yet competition that underpins it means that every decision and every conversation that you have really feels impactful. The next mechanic is all about being in each other's spaces and trying to move across a board where the shapes of the board aren't as regular as they should be. And I think this is a cool mechanic that you often see in games that have a really big map, or you've got lots of different moving pieces that have to kind of spread out across the map. And the mechanic that I'm talking about is area movement. Shall I move right now, or shall I switch the camera around? Area movement games like Root, where players control different factions with asymmetric abilities, have players positioning their troops on a board and trying to maximize the geography of their position that they're currently in to try and gain an advantage over the other player. It usually involves invading another player's space or having a majority in a particular area. The movement between spaces and across a map in this area movement mechanic means that players really have to think about the spatial element of the game, the network that they're building, and how they move their pieces across that network to gain an advantage and ultimately gain the most victory points in a game. The next mechanism is a little bit mathematical. It reminds me of those games that I used to play on my Game Boy, like Tetris, where you had to try and fit all of the pieces into particular spaces to try and fill it up and gain extra points. It is the grid coverage mechanism, and two of Uwe Rosenberg's games, New York Zoo and Patchwork, are an example of this. The idea that you're using polyomino tiles to fill up a grid space as quickly and as efficiently as possible to trigger the endgame scoring or extra bonus scoring means that players have to kind of fill in a puzzle that covers a grid in the quickest and most efficient way possible. If players can do that and utilize the pieces or the polyomino tiles that they've been given and interlock them most efficiently, then they'll definitely win the game. Do you remember when you used to be at school and they made you play a game where you had to hold onto a rope with another group of people and you had to pull as hard as you could to try and get that tag over your line? Well, the tug of war mechanic is probably one of the toughest and most tensest mechanics to use in a board game. It's when a marker is pushed forwards and backwards down a track to try and give a particular player extra power, influence, or control over the game. In games like Seven Wonders Duel, the military track means that if a player can get the military marker towards their end of the track, they will win the game automatically. It's one of the 3 endgame conditions. It's a card drafting game about building your own civilizations, as well as building the 7 wonders. Hidden Leaders also uses the same mechanism, where there are 4 different factions and each player controls a leader that's aligned with 2 of them, and each of the 4 factions has a different win condition. And if players can get that little marker in this tug of war mechanic to be in the right spot at a certain point in the game, then they can win the game. With a lot of abstract games, including games like chess, different pieces have different ways that they move around the board. It's almost like each piece is assigned a particular pattern or path that they need to follow in order to execute their action. The next mechanism that I want to talk about is pattern movement. And one of my favorite pattern movement games is a game about exploring new worlds, uncovering treasures, and also building little settlements. And it is called the Guild of Merchant Explorers. It is a cartography-based map exploration game where the way you explore throughout the game relies on different powers and different terrain cards that appear, and how you move across the map will be up to you, and the pattern and the way that you move all comes down to a combo of terrain and power cards. And I love this game because it has that full sense of exploring where you want to explore, trying to gain bonuses and coins, and also trying to reach the periphery of the map where you can actually score really powerful bonus points. The next mechanic has you sitting still while still being connected to everything around you and giving you the sense that you're flowing and moving across the board. It is called chaining. Chaining is when players place out pieces onto a map, and by connecting their adjacency together, they create pathways that simulate the feeling of moving across. And a game that does this really well is Rainer Knizia's game, Blue Lagoon. A game where players are going to be placing their little people to create little pathways to connect 8 islands together. This game is all about collecting different resources, but also having majorities on different islands that are spread out across the map. The more that they can connect the islands together by either moving across land or across water, then the more points that are going to be scored. The tricky part of this game is that every other player is trying to create these connected pathways as well, and you're all going to intercept at some point and try and avoid each other. It's the Settlers of Catan longest road effect, where you are just building those chains and trying to simulate the idea that you have control of those networks. Do you sometimes feel like that when you're playing a game, the walls are closing in? Or maybe it's just your very big board game collection. I know I sometimes feel a little bit claustrophobic, but one of my other favorite game mechanics is the map reduction mechanic, where everything feels like it starts off really big, but gets closer and closer and closer until there's not much space left in games like Forbidden Island, where the island starts to flood and sink, or Survive Escape from Atlantis. One of my favorite map reduction games is an abstract 3-dimensional game called Santorini. Santorini is a game where players are trying to get their workers to the highest level first. And as players place pieces out onto the map becomes more and more constrictive. Players can get blocked off, and players can find their movement and choices more and more limiting as the city of Santorini is being built. The next mechanic has you gathering a collection of objects, kind of placing them down onto different spaces until you finally reach the final space where you get to trigger an action based on what you've got left in your hand. And it is called the Mancala mechanism. Sounds pretty foreign. That's because it's not a term that people often use, but the mechanic does exist in a lot of Euro games, and it does create for some really interesting decisions. One game that uses the Mancala mechanism is 5 Tribes, a game where players are picking up a collection of meeples of different colors, then dropping them off at different locations as they go until they reach a location where they have their last meeple. They drop it in that last location, and that last location must also have a meeple of the same color, and then that player gets to pick up all the colors of that meeple that they have and then execute the action of that colored meeple. Sounds confusing? Can be when you're playing, but the more you kind of wrap your head around the fact that you're leaving things for other players on future turns, the idea that you're gathering these collection of similar like objects and using their ability, because in 5 Tribes, each colored meeple has a different power and a different way to kind of exploit the map of the board. You can kind of really see how deep the Mancala mechanism can become. We are now entering the top 5 next level board game mechanisms. If you really liked and found this video helpful so far, please consider giving me a like, subscribe, and also check out the other videos on my channel. Now onto the top 5. I really appreciate when games can kind of give different components multiple functions and multiple uses. The next game mechanism is one where the pieces also help to create the landscape in which you're playing the game on. And it is Pieces as a Map. Pieces as a Map is a way of using the game components to create a map for the game itself, and Hive is a perfect example of this. As players place new bugs out into the hive that connects together, the pieces of the insects that they place out actually form the geography and the structure and the shape of the hive itself. The game has players trying to use these other insects to try and surround their opponent's queen bee in order to win the game. My nickname for this game is hexagonal chess, but far more interesting than regular chess. I just love this game because every time you play it, the shape of the hive is going to be different. Sometimes it's a big cluster, sometimes it's a long string, but whatever shape it is, you're going to have to navigate it using the pieces that you place out, and I absolutely am in love with this. I love it when board games give you a menu of different actions and options to choose from on your turn. It means that the scope and the direction of where you go in the game is purely up to you and the choices that you make. The next mechanism that I want to showcase is action points. Action points is basically when players use a certain number of points to invest in particular actions in a game. In a very battle-driven game like Kemet, where players are literally throwing hordes of armies and creatures at each other to try and gain extra victory points, players are going to be investing their prayer points in certain things that they might want to do. That might include increasing the value on a pyramid. It might be moving troops around the board or buying power tiles. All of these action points are being spent and invested in your strategy and your gameplay, and those action points then translates into your victory or win conditions, which I really love in games like this. What really impresses me most is when game designers can take a game component and elevate it to another level. Show it in a unique way that integrates with the theme of a game. There are so many games with cards and tiles and tokens out there that a lot of the times we've seen how they've been used before. One thing that I really like is the use of multi-functional cards. In games like La Granja, which is a farming economic driven game, there is the use of multifunctional cards. Each card can be used in 4 different ways to expand a player's efficiency and their productivity on their farm. They can expand their farm by using the right hand side of the card. They can increase the harvesting spaces on the left hand side. They can place them in these little windows to use the card's specific abilities, or place them at the top to create market barriers which they can deliver goods to earn victory points in the game. The fact that each and every card has 4 different placements, and the idea that the game comes with a deck of completely unique cards means there is a multitude of different combinations and ways that these cards can really allow players to lean into different strategies in the game. We are definitely getting into the nitty-gritty of this board game list. The top 2. The next mechanic that I want to talk about is all about unlocking and giving your game a little bit of a crescendo. That means as you play the game, you can remove things off your board and open up extra abilities, actions, and ways to score. What I'm referring to is the tech tree mechanic. The idea that everything that you choose to do and invest in means that you can uncover other possibilities. The idea that if you've got resources that are covering your board at the beginning of the game, as you play the game and uncover those resources, it opens up other things that you can do, other pathways you can pursue, other strategies you can follow. Inside, you're trying to fulfill 6 out of the 10 different victory conditions. And as you play the game, you're going to be moving things off your board by either taking a top action or bottom action and then placing them out onto the map. As you place things out onto the map, you are investing in a particular gameplay style and strategy. And that is such a beautiful, elegant mechanism to me. The fact that a game can kind of cover up the things that you can do at the beginning of the game and allow you to unlock them as you play and take actions throughout the game, meaning that the scope of what you can do becomes larger and larger as you head towards the end of the game. Games that do this really fascinate me because they allow you to explore different ways to get to your destination, earn those points. The fact that Scythe has so many different ways to trigger the end game means that you can kind of go, ooh, I'm not very good in combat, but I'm really good at these 3 other things. So I'm going to really try and head for those 3 goals. But if another opponent was also doing the same thing, that's going to invite competition in that part of the game. Before we dive into my number 1 favorite next level board game mechanic, let's take a moment to go back to my original beginner board game mechanic video. My number 1 mechanic there was worker placement. Absolutely love worker placement games. There's an interesting social dynamic that occurs in worker placement games that allows you to actually have this cool indirect interaction with other players while still allowing you to do your own thing and formulate your own game plan. So, in terms of my number 1 for this video, it is similar but slightly different. And I think this mechanic definitely takes that worker placement mechanic to another level. It is using dice as workers. Using dice as workers in Eurogames is incredibly deep, rich, and fascinating to me. I have two favorite games that actually do this, and that is the Castles of Burgundy and Teotihuacan, the City of Gods. I just love the puzzle that it really creates. The fact that you roll these dice and then you can manipulate the dice pip, but then the values on those dice pip need to be spent in a certain way, which invites certain levels of restriction in the gameplay, the resources that you can do, where you place little tiles out onto your grid, or even what goods you can actually take. And Castles of Burgundy is the epitome of using dice in such an interesting and functional way. I think in Teotihuacan, City of Gods, I love the way that you move your dice around the rondel on the game map. Wherever they land, if you've got more dice of your color, you can then increase the power level of the actions that you get there. So if there are 2 red dice in a particular temple and you move your red dice into that same area, you can gain a power level 3 for whatever action is in that space. On the converse side, if there are other dice of different colors in that same area, you're going to have to pay cost in the form of coca. So there's an interplay of not only the value that your die has, and not to mention if you get to 6, you can ascend and get bonuses in this game. The value not only is important, but also the positioning of the dice and how you place the dice in relation to the other dice in the game. And that dynamic of not only worker placement, but that added level of dice value that infiltrates the worker placement really makes this game probably one of my favorite mechanics to see in any heavy Euro game. So I hope you enjoyed this new next level list, and if you haven't seen my original video, please definitely consider checking out that video. That video is more aimed at beginners, people who are stepping into the modern board gaming hobby for the first time, or maybe thinking about designing their own board game for the first time. If you found this video super helpful, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. I have a plethora of amazing other video content on this channel. If you really want to help my channel grow, then please definitely head over to my Patreon page. I would absolutely appreciate it. If you're already supporting me on Patreon, get ready to see your names in the credit screen. Otherwise, this is Danny signing out. I hope your next game is an amazing one. See you soon.